The dawn was a shard of bone-chilling cold when the sun finally pried apart the shutters of night. The clearing was a tableau of destruction, a graveyard of lost battles. And amidst this desolate landscape, the old Alpha lay, his flanks stained with the icy water of defeat. His vision blurred, each blink a painful revelation of what was left. Broken, the pup whimpered, pressing close to the warrior whose name had been lost to time. All around them, the forest mocked their plight. Bare branches scraped the sky like talons, and the wind moaned a requiem for the fallen. The cub looked up, his big brown eyes mirroring the vast emptiness of the frosted world. Hunger gnawed at his belly, but fear anchored him to his father's side. His small pink tongue lolled out, tasting the bitter tongue of the air. Howling was the language of the wild, but this was a silence he couldn't comprehend. Where were the comforting grunts, the reassuring sniffs? The clearing, once the stage for a brutal drama, was now a silent tomb. His gaze slid to his father's face, etched with fatigue and pain. There was a strange stillness around him. The warrior didn't stir, didn't move. It was a stillness that transcended rest. The cub shivered, pressing closer to the rigid form. He nuzzled against his father, seeking warmth, seeking solace. Hunger turned to panic. He whimpered again, a tiny, plaintive sound in the vast wilderness. What had happened to his mother, to his siblings? Why was he alone with this statue of a father who no longer smelled like home? In the hushed symphony of the forest, his whimpers echoed unanswered. He licked his father's cheek, tasting the cold of despair. The dawn bled into day, the sunlight turning the snow to shards of glass. The cub stirred, his small muscles protesting against the immobility that gnawed at them. He looked around. The world was vast, white, and utterly silent. There was no shift in the tableau of defeat around him. His father remained unmoving, his breath stilled. Fear gave way to a dawning understanding. He was alone. The cub scrambled down, his small limbs stiff from hours spent curled into a ball. The snow crunched softly under his paws, a sound that startled him. Fear made him quick. He raced in circles, then skidded to a halt, sniffing frantically at the frozen earth. There was no familiar scent, no reassuring track. He was truly alone. With the courage of youth, he set off into the blinding whiteness. Each step was a challenge to the stiffness in his limbs. He followed the vague tracks of his father, seeking guidance, seeking answers. The forest, once alive with battles, was now a silent judge. The trees offered no solace, their branches clawing at the leaden sky. The wind rustled through them, whispering tales the cub couldn't understand. He walked until his legs shook, until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the snow in hues of fading fire. Still, there was no home, no haven. Exhaustion tugged at his eyelids, but sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. The night was filled with unseen dangers. A twig snapped, and he bolted, his heart hammering against his ribs. A leaf fell, and he cowered. The moon replaced the sun, and the forest grew teeth. He huddled beneath a snow-laden bush, shivering. Fear kept him awake, each shadow twisting into a monstrous shape. The stars wheeled above, indifferent to his plight. Dawn broke again, painting the sky in hues of lavender and rose. And with the sunrise, a new feeling bloomed within him. Hunger, sharp and insistent, clawed at his belly. He remembered his father's weary grunts, his mother's comforting licks. But they were echoes now, ghosts of warmth in a frozen world. Panic welled up, choking him. He had to find food, but where? How? Driven by desperation, he ventured out again. The forest was a labyrinth of white, and his resolve thinned with each step. The snow muffled all sounds, deadened all signs of life. Just when his hope dwindled, he found it. A rabbit track, crisp and inviting. Without hesitation, he followed. The trail led him deeper into the forest's embrace, away from the battlefield of yesterday. After what felt like hours, the trail widened, opening into a small meadow. And there, in the center, a miracle awaited him. A frozen stream choked with weeds and guarded by a thicket of trees. But nestled between them, a pool of open water shimmered like a sapphire in the emerald gloom. The sight jolted him. Water. There had to be fish. His paws carried him faster than he could think, faster than his small lungs could catch their breath. Reaching the stream, he crouched, his reflection staring back, a tiny warrior in a world of ice. He lapped at the water, drank deeply, and then, driven by instincts honed over generations, he plunged in. It was freezing, shocking, but he pushed on. His muzzle plunged into the water, feeling for movement, for life. When his teeth clamped onto something small and slippery, he recoiled instinctively. But the creature flopped weakly against his jaws. He surfaced, gasping, dragging his prize behind him. It wasn't much, but it was something. Exhaustion pulled at him, but survival demanded effort. He dragged his catch from the stream and crunched into the warm flesh. The taste of victory, salty and sweet, flooded his mouth. He ate until his belly was full, until he could eat no more. As he dozed, the memory of his father's final battle echoed in his dreams. The forest was a different place then, alive with sound and fury. His father, strong and fierce, fought to protect the pack. But the battle was long and hard, and the enemy was relentless. His father's strength ebbed, his steps faltered, and the pup watched in helpless terror. Then the enemy attacked, tearing at his father, weakening him further. The pup whimpered, wanting to help, but unable to do anything. His father fell, his breaths growing shallow, his eyes dimming. And the pup felt a surge of grief, a pain that tore through his small body. He wanted to wake up, to shake his father, to bark furiously at the enemy. But he couldn't. He was stuck in a nightmare he couldn't escape. And then, as suddenly as it started, it ended. The clearing was empty. The other wolves were gone. And the pup, shaking and whimpering, nudged his father's still form. But there was no response. No encouraging lick, no guiding nudge. Only the cold, mocking wind. The dream faded, leaving him breathless and shaken. He blinked, looking around. The forest was silent, the meadow deserted. He was truly alone. The cub stood, his small body trembling with unshed tears. The forest was a graveyard of memories, and he was a lone seedling struggling to grow in the shadow of the old oak. The journey back was a blur. The meadow, the stream, the battle, they were all a jumble of sensations. But when he reached the clearing, he paused. The battleground had shifted, had become something else. The wind, colder now, moaned through the bare branches. The sun hid its face behind the clouds, and the snow glistened with an eerie light. He sniffed the air, trying to find a sign, some clue that he wasn't utterly alone. But there was nothing except the biting chill and the hollow silence. The forest seemed to hold its breath, watching him. There was no solace here, no comfort. He was alone in a world that offered no mercy. Days blurred into nights. Each sunrise brought a fresh blanket of frost, each sunset a deeper chill. Hunger gnawed at his belly, but fear kept him rooted to the spot. He was learning the harsh language of solitude. The forest was his teacher, its rules carved in ice. One day, driven by hunger, he ventured out. The white world stretched endlessly around him. He walked until his paws bled, until the cold seeped into his bones. But he kept going. The forest had taught him that survival was a gamble. The first rule was to keep moving. The second, never turn your back on the hunter, or maybe it was never become the prey. He didn't know. The cub had vanished. In his place stood a young wolf, his eyes sharp, his stance alert. His fur, once soft and fluffy, was now sleek and weather-beaten. His muscles, though lean, were coiled with potential energy. He was a study in contrasts, fragility balanced on the edge of ferocity. Winter had been his crucible, the forest his trial, and he had emerged changed. The wind shifted. It brought a new, heavier scent, that of a larger, more relentless threat. The rival pack, which had circled with methodical patience, fell silent. They stood motionless, ears pricked, their yellow eyes reflecting shards of moon. Their leader, his ear torn, stepped forward, but his gaze was no longer on his prey. He scanned the horizon. The air had changed. It now carried a heavy, coppery smell that masked the scent of blood and sweat. The matriarch snapped her head up and swung it through the charged air. Her single eye narrowed. She had understood before anyone else. Something was coming, older than their rivalries. Lightning split the sky, revealing the scene in a brilliant flash. For a heartbeat, every silhouette was etched into the night. The exhausted alpha, his flanks trembling. The little pup pressed against him. The bear in the background, his scarred body a silent bulwark. And the rival pack, frozen, wavering between prey and the unknown. Then darkness swallowed the forest. A low rumble rolled across the sky, followed by another, deeper, duller, coming from the earth itself. It wasn't just thunder. It was the distant crash of water, an incessant roar, and the earth was already vibrating beneath their paws. The matriarch let out a deep howl, an ancient command passed down through generations. With a powerful nudge, she pressed her shoulder against the old alpha, urging him to move. He began to run, his breath a hoarse whisper. The pup pressed against his flank. The bear, after a brief hesitation, moved to cover their retreat. The rivals understood too, their ears turned toward the sound. What was coming was not an enemy to be bitten or crushed. It was the tide, a blind force that sweeps away hunter and hunted alike. Their muscles, tensed for attack, relaxed. The smell of water, of damp earth and rust, grew stronger. Hunger demanded perseverance, but a stronger instinct commanded flight. The leader hesitated briefly, his eyes fixed on the wolf, so close and vulnerable. Then another flash of lightning lit the horizon, and the wave revealed itself. A liquid wall swallowed the plain, devouring trees and hollows. The roar of the torrent drowned even the screams of the wind. The rival leader turned and led his pack into a panicked retreat. They disappeared into the forest, abandoning the fight. There was no stopping the wolves now. The matriarchs led them on, steering the group toward a high rock face. Every step was a struggle. The rain suddenly began to pour. Heavy drops struck the earth like stones. The snow turned to mud, making the ascent even harder. The old alpha stumbled, but he did not collapse. His panting breath marked the rhythm of their progress. The pup stumbled, but the alpha slowed his pace so the small one could keep up. The roar of the water swelled, so loud it filled the chest. Every second gained was a victory. Every foot gained a reprieve. At last, they reached the plateau, a raised ledge overlooking the gorge. At that moment, the torrent burst through below them. In the white light of lightning, the valley vanished beneath a raging sea. Grass, frozen bushes, dry gullies all were swallowed by the incessant roar. The improvised river consumed the landscape, tearing away earth, erasing every trace of the battle. Down below, where the rivals had scattered, there were only submerged shadows. The wolves huddled together. The bear, positioned at the rear, braced his massive form against the wind. The matriarch once again pressed her shoulder against the old alpha, as if to say, "Hold on." He bowed his head slightly, his eyes half closed, but his legs were planted firmly in the ground. The pup, nestled against him, found in his trembling flanks the protection it had never known. The rain washed away the dust and blood, drawing shining streams across his coat. Below them, the tide rushed on. But on this ledge, there was more than just survival. There was a fragile promise of hope. The old alpha raised his head, despite all his fatigue, and let out a deep howl. It was not a cry of despair. It was a proclamation, a challenge to the storm. He was still standing. Slowly, dawn rose over a transformed forest. The stormy night had left its mark. The dry earth had turned into raging streams, carving new scars. Puddles reflected the first rays of light, and every branch, wet with drops, glittered. But in the valley below, chaos still reigned. The gorge was flooded, a river of mud carrying away branches and carcasses. The thunder of the flood now ceased, like a lasting warning. On the rocky outcrop, the wolves stood together. The matriarchs, upright, unshaken, remained guardians. Her single eye, shining in the rising light, pierced the horizon. By her side stood the old grizzly bear. He was not of their kind, yet he remained. His massive body, marked by old battles, still towered like a wall. His silent presence was a wordless testament. But everyone's attention was focused on the old alpha. His whole body trembled, his flanks contracted, and suddenly, with a primal roar, life burst forth. A small, weak pup slid to the ground, wet, fragile. Its first gasping breaths mingled with the sounds of morning. Its still weak legs tried to unfold. A new miracle was born. The old alpha, exhausted, almost collapsed, but his instinct took over. He turned and nudged his newborn with his trembling muzzle. His half-closed, tired eyes shone with a new light, a mix of relief and love. The little one tried awkwardly to stand, fell, and got back up, a tiny yet decisive struggle. By his side, the pup who had fled in the night approached, curious, and placed his small paw against the still damp fur of the newborn. In that fragile touch, an unlikely brotherhood was born. The matriarchs watched impassively, as if captivated by the solemnity of the moment. Slowly, she raised her head and let out a deep howl, an ancient song carried by the echoes of the hills. The bear, standing a little way off, answered. His deep roar shook the air, mingling with that of the ancient leader. Together, they proclaimed to the forest that, despite rivals, despite storms, life had triumphed. The sun, finally breaking through the clouds, poured golden rays that enveloped the group. The rain softened to a light drizzle. The air, still filled with moisture, vibrated with renewed energy. The alpha, swaying but standing, protected two pups, the one he had just given birth to, and the one the night had entrusted to his care. Their tiny bodies pressed against his legs, seeking warmth and safety. Their high-pitched yelps echoed the deep calls of the elders. Down in the gorge, the destruction remained visible. Uprooted trees, muddy debris, the silence of drowned prey. But on the rocky outcrop, there was neither defeat nor despair. There stood a circle of wolves, a one-eyed matriarch, a scarred bear, an exhausted yet victorious alpha, and two new beings, fragile and luminous, already bearing the future. The storm had failed, the rivals had failed, the flood had failed,